my god. Huh? They shot it up. Who's dead?
Hey, bud, one of the drivers dead, bro.
Oh yeah, he did.
He dead, motherfucker.
A young mother is dead after being shot while she was in a car on the city's south side. Police say her baby survived that shooting unharmed. Hello again, everyone, on this Thursday morning. I'm Patrick Elwood.
And I'm Dina Bair. Thank you for joining us. WGN's Angelica Sanchez is live in the Auburn Gresham neighborhood with the latest on the investigation. Angelica?
Pat and Dina, nothing short of a miracle is how the baby's condition is being described, as those that were on the scene tell us that there were actual bullet casings found in the baby's car seat. Crime Stoppers is now offering a reward for any information that could lead to an arrest. Skycab 9 flies over the 7900 block of South May Street, where a white vehicle riddled with bullet holes has collided with a nearby GMC van. Officers located two victims inside the car, a 26-year-old woman and a 27-year-old man. The female victim was struck multiple times and passed away from her injuries, while the male victim is expected to survive.
Imagine sitting in a car in the middle of the day, traffic moving, people walking nearby, a baby sitting quietly in the back seat, and then suddenly, gunfire explodes from every direction. More than 50 bullets tear through one vehicle. A young mother dies. But somehow, the baby survives without a single injury. How does something like this happen in broad daylight? Who wanted Gabryel Ayres dead so badly that they turned a Chicago street into a war zone? And why are people now saying this attack may have been planned long before that day? Welcome back to Horrific Crimes. Here we cover real, true crime cases, from shocking murders and missing persons to dark relationship crimes. Each episode digs into the motives and secrets behind the headlines. Please like and subscribe for weekly uploads that reveal the darkest corners of human behavior. Now, let's get into the story. On February 4th, 2026, the city of Chicago witnessed one of the most terrifying daytime shootings in recent memory. 26-year-old Gabryel Ayres, a young mother and hairstylist, was inside a white vehicle near 79th Street and South May Street in the Auburn Gresham neighborhood when gunmen suddenly opened fire. Reports say the shooters unleashed dozens of bullets into the car while her baby daughter sat in the back seat. Witnesses described panic, screaming, and non-stop gunfire echoing through the streets.
These guys just coming out with all with long guns, just shooting. There were bullets, casings all over the street. It was just absolutely ridiculous. It was obviously, I don't know what the origin of this was, but they were obviously after this car and the people in it. But, whether they knew or not knew a baby was in the back seat, they didn't care. They were just going to shoot wildly at this car and end up killing a young mother.
The attack happened in broad daylight, close to homes, businesses, and even near St. Sabina Church. Gabryel was rushed to the hospital after suffering multiple gunshot wounds, but doctors could not save her life. A man inside the vehicle survived with injuries. But the most shocking detail of all was waiting in the back seat. Her baby girl was still alive. Not one bullet touched the child. That single detail left the entire community stunned. How could a car be destroyed by bullets and the baby survive? Tonight, we break down the life of Gabryel Ayres, the horrifying ambush that ended her life, the emotional vigil that followed, and the disturbing questions investigators are still trying to answer. Because this was not just another shooting. This was an execution-style attack that shook Chicago to its core. Now, let's talk about who the victim really was before the incident happened. Gabryel Ayres was more than another name in a police report. She was a 26-year-old mother, a hairstylist, a daughter, and a woman trying to build a better future for herself and her little girl. Friends called her Gabby. People who knew her said she was kind, caring, hardworking, and always focused on her child. While the internet only saw headlines after her death, the people close to her saw someone who loved deeply and worked hard every single day. Most days for Gabryel were simple. She spent hours doing hair, talking with clients, laughing with friends, and taking care of her daughter. Like many young mothers in Chicago, she was balancing work, family, and dreams at the same time. People remembered her smile, her energy, and the way she stayed focused on becoming successful. Even during difficult times, she kept pushing forward. Nobody around her imagined that her life would suddenly become the center of one of Chicago's most shocking crime scenes. The woman behind the headlines had goals that were still unfinished. At only 26 years old, Gabryel was still building her future piece by piece. She was creating a life for her daughter while trying to grow her career as a hairstylist. To many people, she represented young mothers who wake up every morning trying to survive, provide, and protect their children. But while she was focused on her future, someone else may have already been planning violence behind the scenes. That is the terrifying part of this story. As news of her death spread across Chicago, emotions exploded online. Social media quickly filled with photos, tributes, and messages from people who knew her personally. Many described her as loving and peaceful. Others could not believe that a young mother with a baby in the car could become the target of such brutal violence. The story shocked people because this was not just a random victim. This was somebody's daughter, somebody's friend, somebody's mother. And now, an innocent child would have to grow up without her. But on one Chicago afternoon, everything changed forever. What started as a normal day suddenly turned into chaos, gunfire, fear, and heartbreak. In only a few seconds, Gabryel Ayres' entire future disappeared. The young mother who spent her days caring for her daughter would never return home again. And as investigators searched for answers, one question continued haunting the city: who wanted Gabryel dead badly enough to open fire in broad daylight? February 4th, 2026 started like any other cold afternoon in Chicago. Cars moved slowly through Auburn Gresham. People walked past stores. Some were heading home, others were just starting their day. But near 79th and May Street, inside a white vehicle, 26-year-old Gabryel Ayres had no idea her life was only moments away from ending. A man sat inside the car with her, while her little daughter rested quietly in the back seat. Everything looked normal. Nothing looked dangerous. But according to witnesses, another vehicle was already getting closer. And what happened next would leave an entire city in shock. Then suddenly, chaos exploded. Witnesses said armed men dressed in dark clothing jumped out of a red vehicle and rushed toward Gabryel's car. Before people nearby could even react, gunfire erupted across the street. Bullets tore through windows. The sound echoed through the neighborhood as terrified people ran for cover. Some ducked behind parked cars. Others froze in fear. Video footage later showed the gunman firing again and again without stopping. Reports say dozens of rounds were unleashed in only seconds. This was not random violence. This looked planned, cold, direct, and terrifying. As the shooting continued, Gabryel's vehicle lost control and slammed into another SUV nearby. Glass shattered everywhere. Smoke filled the air. The white car became covered in bullet holes, while witnesses watched in horror from a distance. Some people could not believe what they were seeing. Others were too scared to move. In broad daylight, on a busy Chicago street, gunmen turned the area into what looked like a war zone. And somehow, in the middle of all that violence, a child was still trapped inside the back seat. Police later said Gabryel suffered multiple gunshot wounds during the ambush.
This here is unbelievable. This young lady was a beautiful young lady with a beautiful child, and life just cut short. For what?
The man inside the vehicle was also shot but survived. Investigators quickly began reviewing footage and searching for answers, but one detail made this case even more disturbing. Witness videos showed the shooters continuing to fire toward the car even after the crash happened. It was as if they wanted to make absolutely sure nobody escaped. The attack shocked Chicago because of how fearless the gunmen appeared. They opened fire in the middle of the afternoon as if they did not care who was watching. And then, just as quickly as it started, it was over. The gunmen ran back toward the red vehicle and disappeared from the area before officers arrived at the scene. Behind them, they left shattered glass, bullet casings, injured victims, and a grieving city searching for answers. But one question still haunted everyone who heard about the shooting: who wanted Gabryel Ayres dead badly enough to carry out such a brutal ambush in broad daylight? After the gunfire finally stopped, the entire street went silent. The sound of screaming replaced the sound of bullets. Smoke filled the air as people slowly stepped out from hiding, trying to understand what had just happened. A white vehicle sat destroyed in the middle of the road, covered in shattered glass and bullet holes. Inside that car was 26-year-old Gabryel Ayres, fighting for her life after one of the most violent daytime shootings the neighborhood had seen in years. But then officers made a discovery that nobody at the scene was prepared for. As first responders moved closer to the vehicle, they noticed something moving in the back seat. Sitting quietly inside a child car seat was Gabryel's baby daughter. The little girl was alive. Somehow, despite dozens of bullets tearing through the car from every direction, the child had no physical injuries. Officers could hardly believe what they were seeing. Around her were broken windows, shattered metal, and the remains of a brutal ambush. But the baby survived. In the middle of chaos and death, one innocent life was still breathing. Witnesses later described the scene as heartbreaking. The child was surrounded by destruction while emergency crews rushed toward the car. Some reports said the little girl was still strapped safely into her seat as police carefully carried her away from the wreckage. It was a moment that emotionally shattered the community because this was not just another crime scene anymore. There was a baby inside that vehicle the entire time. A child who could not understand the violence happening around her. A child who would one day grow up hearing the story of how her mother died protecting her during a hail of gunfire. Even experienced officers were reportedly shaken by what they saw that afternoon. The image of that little girl sitting alive inside a car destroyed by bullets stayed in the minds of everyone who responded to the shooting. Community members later called it a miracle. Others said they still could not understand how the child escaped without a single injury while bullets ripped through the vehicle again and again. In a city already tired of violence, this detail hit people differently. It forced everyone to stop and think about how close that child came to losing her life too. One tiny life survived a nightmare. And that single moment became the emotional center of the entire case. While investigators searched for the gunman responsible for the attack, many people could only focus on the child left behind. Because long after the police lights disappeared and the crime scene was cleaned up, one painful truth remained. A little girl survived the unthinkable, but she would now have to grow up without her mother. News of Gabryel Ayres' death spread across Chicago within hours, and the reaction was immediate. People were angry. Others were heartbroken. Social media quickly filled with photos of the young mother alongside emotional messages demanding justice. Many could not stop thinking about the baby who survived inside the bullet-riddled vehicle. For residents in Auburn Gresham, this was more than another headline about violence. This felt personal. A 26-year-old mother had been gunned down in broad daylight while her child sat only feet away. And for many people in the community, that detail changed everything. Just days after the shooting, hundreds gathered near the scene and at local churches to honor Gabryel's memory. Candles lined the sidewalks as families stood together in silence. Some people cried openly. Others prayed quietly while holding flowers and balloons. Community leaders spoke through microphones, begging for the violence to stop. Church members called for peace, while city officials promised that investigators would continue searching for the shooters responsible for the ambush. The atmosphere felt heavy. Every person standing there knew a young child had just lost her mother forever. As the investigation continued, community activists and local leaders pushed harder for answers. Reports said rewards were offered for information leading to arrests, and residents begged witnesses to come forward. People believed somebody knew exactly who carried out the shooting. Flyers with Gabryel's photo appeared across neighborhoods, while online posts urged anyone with information to speak to police. But fear remained a major problem. Some residents worried about retaliation. Others feared the shooters were still nearby. And with no immediate arrests announced, frustration across the city only grew stronger. The vigils became emotional gatherings filled with sadness, prayer, and anger. Parents hugged their children tighter, while listening to speakers talk about the danger growing in Chicago streets. Some residents said they were tired of seeing young lives destroyed by gun violence. Others questioned how gunmen could open fire so fearlessly in the middle of the afternoon without caring who was nearby. As candles flickered in the cold night air, people whispered the same painful question again and again. Why did this happen to Gabryel? Chicago had seen violence before, but this case felt different. Maybe it was the image of a baby surviving inside a car torn apart by bullets. Maybe it was how brutally the attack happened in broad daylight. Or maybe it was because Gabryel Ayres reminded people of someone they knew, a young mother simply trying to live her life. Whatever the reason, the city refused to forget her name. And as the crowd slowly disappeared and the candles burned out, one thing became clear. The demand for justice was only growing louder. After the shooting that killed Gabryel Ayres, investigators immediately focused on one major clue. Witnesses reported seeing multiple gunmen escape the area inside a red vehicle moments after the ambush. Police began searching for suspects connected to that car while detectives collected shell casings, surveillance footage, and witness statements from the crime scene. But even with videos circulating online and dozens of shots fired in broad daylight, no arrests were immediately announced. That silence only made the case more disturbing. People across Chicago started asking the same question. How could such a violent attack happen in the middle of the day and the killers still disappear? As detectives worked the case, many people believed the shooting looked extremely targeted. Witnesses said the gunmen did not randomly spray bullets across the street. Instead, they appeared focused directly on Gabryel's vehicle. Reports claimed the shooters jumped out, opened fire repeatedly, and continued shooting even after the car crashed. To investigators, that kind of violence suggested planning. But police remained careful with public statements, refusing to officially confirm a motive while the investigation continued. Soon, theories began spreading online. Some people believed the attack may have been connected to a personal dispute. Others wondered if Gabryel or the male passenger inside the car had been specifically followed before the ambush happened. A few even questioned whether the shooters could have mistaken the vehicle for someone else's. But despite all the speculation, police warned the public not to jump to conclusions without evidence. Because behind every rumor was a real family already suffering through unimaginable pain. What made the case even more chilling was how fearless the gunman appeared. According to witnesses, the shooters opened fire near homes, businesses, and churches without hesitation. Parents, workers, and drivers were all nearby when bullets started flying through the neighborhood. Investigators reportedly reviewed nearby security footage hoping it would reveal the suspects' movements before and after the shooting. But as days passed without arrests, fear slowly turned into frustration across the community. For many people, the hardest part was knowing a baby survived inside that car while her mother did not. Every new update about the investigation brought the story back into public attention because this case carried emotional weight far beyond the violence itself. Gabryel Ayres was not just another victim in a headline. She was a young mother whose child would now grow up hearing about the horrifying afternoon that changed her life forever. And with every passing week, the pressure on investigators only grew stronger. A 26-year-old woman lost her life. A child lost her mother. And a city was left searching for answers. Even now, investigators continue asking witnesses to come forward with any information connected to the red vehicle and the gunman seen fleeing the scene. Somewhere, someone knows exactly what happened that afternoon. Someone knows who pulled the triggers. Someone knows why Gabryel Ayres never made it home. One day, that little girl will grow up and ask what happened to her mother. She will want to know why bullets tore through a car while she sat helpless in the back seat. She will want answers about the people responsible for taking her mother away forever. And when that day comes, the truth will still matter just as much as it does now. And someone out there already knows the answer. Do you think this attack was targeted? What do you believe really happened that afternoon? Share your thoughts below. And if you enjoy true crime stories that uncover the darkest mysteries behind real cases, subscribe now, because this story is far from forgotten.